Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, as promised, bringing you an important update on the fight to save the lives of 400 ostriches located in the Kootenays of British Columbia. That's our special campaign called SaveTheOstriches.com. Here's why.
If they are allowed to do this to our 400, 300-pound animals, you're next. This is the opening up Pandora's box, in my eyes, to the government. They thought we were isolated, but we were a high number of animals, large animals. We need to stand together as farmers, as mothers, as fathers, as just humans, and we need to protect what we have left for our children, and that's our rights to have animals on our land and raise them how we want and have a say in how we treat them and protect them.
In case you missed it, 400 ostriches that appear to have herd immunity are about to be killed in the name of protecting public health from the avian flu. Not only, of course, is that type of behavior concerning if you're concerned about our food sovereignty and farmers' ability to farm, but these particular ostriches were actually being used to further science to fight the avian flu. Well, today I have an important interview with the farmer's daughter. Her name is Katie Pisitny. But before I get to her, where she's going to tell you what happened from the anonymous call to being threatened that, hey, by the way, we used a PCR test on a couple of dead birds and it tested positive for H5N1. And by the way, it's against the law and you could go to jail if you do a test of your own to see if that's true. So before we get to that story and more that she's going to share to you, I want to let you know about an update before I could bring you this report. You see, some people have heard about this. Understandably, they're concerned. They want the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to go ahead and reverse this order. So a group of them, not a very big group, came out and supported these guys in protests, peaceful, lawful protests, not in the quarantine space, near the farm. And guess what? The CFIA sent this message because they had canceled on the 22nd. And they said, hey, guess what? We're coming back and we heard that you have protesters. So just so you know, we're coming with the RCMP as well. These are just farmers trying to make the world a better place, raising ostriches who, by the way, live for 75 years. We're going to get to Katie's story, but so you don't forget, if you haven't already, pull up another screen and go to SaveTheOstriches.com and quickly fire off the emails we've already laid out for you to do in just a few seconds to demand that this culling order be reversed. All right, Katie joins us now, the ostrich farmer's daughter. Now, tell us to begin with, what do these ostriches mean to you and your family and the people that work with them?
Absolutely everything. They are pets, they are family. They are, some of those ostriches out there are 34 years old. So we're not just your average chicken or, they've been with us. We've grown up with them. They're not just a livelihood. They are something that my mom has believed in her whole life, the last 35 years, I should say. She always said to us kids, these ostriches are going to do something amazing for mankind one day. And we were like, okay. And we've always loved her passion, her determination, and they're just a really special part and unique piece of our family.
And your mom was right. They are doing something amazing for mankind. We're going to get into that. But before we do talk about the important role that they're playing in science, let's talk about what happened. Why on earth are you being told that they have to be slaughtered, murdered, whatever way you want to label it, by February 1st?
It has multiple reasons to scratch your head and wonder, are we not supposed to be saving these guys? So in mid-December, there was signs and symptoms of illness, but these signs and symptoms are not that have been new to the farm. So the same symptoms that they were recognizing in mid-December were those that they had back in 2020. And so back in 2020, they had these signs and symptoms. they lost some ostriches. They took some tissue samples from the deceased, and they went and took it to the vet. The vet took it in. They did a bunch of sample testing, and that came back positive in 2020 for Pseudomonas. It's a really bad bacteria. And so this time that these symptoms and stuff happened, they thought that it was just the same like a Pseudomonas bacteria problem. So they started treating the ostrich, and they started noticing that this seemed a lot stronger. It just kind of was hitting the birds a bit harder, hitting the ostrich, that some of them, and these were all the young ones. So we were noticing the signs and symptoms in the mid-December in our 3 to 4 year olds. All of our older birds had not one symptom. So out of concern, they tried to get a hold of their vet, and then because it was the holidays, they were unable to get a hold of their vet. They left a message with him, and then speed up to about the 28th, and an anonymous tip, or 27th, an anonymous tip came in to CFIA saying that they were sure that we had avian flu, which is a little ironic, is anonymous tip.
Yeah.
But and then so they explained to CFIA the symptoms, and CFIA said, you know what, like, yeah, it does not sound like the avian flu symptoms. You have ostriches that have been sick, and you have ostriches that are getting better from it. And there's different symptoms. So they said, do you mind though if we come and do a sample? And they said, if you could let us know when you have a new death or a couple, because they would like to test 2. And so we did. A following day, there was a couple that had succumbed to their symptoms, and called them and let them know. They came out the next day at 1 in the afternoon. They came, so 2 CFIA employees came out. I don't know if they were vets. They took 2 swabs, and they took swabs, PCR tests, and they did one in the mouth, an oral sample, and they did rectal sample off 2 deceased ostrich. At the same time, they were asked, hey, do you mind if we take some samples off our healthy animals? And at that time, they said, no, that's not possible. They took that. They went back to the lab. So they left here, which we're about an hour and a half away from Vernon, and they left here at about, I'm going to say like probably 2:30, and they had to drive back to Vernon, and they had to get the samples back to the lab. And by 2:00 the next day already, we had positive test results from the Abbotsford lab that we had H5N1. At that time, they were going to actually wanted them destroyed really quickly, almost immediately. And the more they just started to talk to them and say, like, listen, we're involved in a joint antibody study here. This is a research farm. This is not a commercial farm. We have no meat sales. We are not in the meat industry. We are a research facility right now. And so my mom was actually with me. I took her for the first time after 2 years. My dad had a stroke, and so he's a paraplegic, and so he's at home, and we surprised my mom with taking her to Mexico. And the whole time we were in Mexico, it was Zoom calls. And so Dave was here at the farm doing those tests with CFIA. And my mom had a Zoom call with top officials from CFIA, top officials, vets, and they were all very interested in the program and what we were doing. And they said, like, this is fascinating that they're building a resistance.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then they said that, they didn't feel, that it was going to be enough, that that the cull action was still on the table. So my mom and her business partner Dave filled out a unit exemption. So it's an exemption of depopulation. So you would fill out forms that give you a chance at appealing the depopulation, destroy your animals. And when they received that unit, I was here, and like it was a unit. My mom said to their caseworker for CFIA, she said, "I can't answer this. This this is all of these questions pertain to a commercial poultry farm. We're not a commercial poultry farm. They are not a chicken. They are not a turkey, and they're not a duck. Like, I can't answer these." And Cassandra Barrett, their caseworker at the time, said, you need to answer these, otherwise you're not in compliance. So you have to answer this." And my mom said, "Well, I can't answer yes to these. Like, a bunch of these are no. These questions don't pertain to me." And she said, she said, "Just answer the questions, because if you don't answer the questions, you're automatically in non-compliance." So my mom rushed to fill out the forms out of nervousness and just like, "Oh my gosh, okay, well, we'll fill this out and I'll just put the no's. No, 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 because it doesn't matter. It doesn't pertain to me." And a few days later, so on January 10th, they received the letter here of the judgment that all 400 ostrich do not meet the exemption of depopulation criteria, and that they want them all culled by February 1st. So February 1st, let's just get this straight, is February 1st, they want them destroyed and disposed of by then. So it's not so it's kind of not like we don't go February 1st to fight for their lives. It's like they're going to be putting the pressure on before that, because they're going to see us in non-compliance. I think it's really important to note for everybody, so we can paint the picture so people can kind of in their heads see. So our farm has a couple pens. There's different pens. And in one pen is all of our older birds that would have been exposed in 2020.
Yeah.
And not one of them, up to date, not one of them have had one symptom, not one death, not one. Everybody's been absolutely good over there. All of the deaths, and up to where they were building up their own little herd immunity, were in our 3 to 4 year olds, so that have never been exposed to it.
Right.
Which then also raises the question, because they're saying that our ostriches could be contagious to other animals. So those our young ostrich have lived with those ostriches who've been exposed before.
Yeah.
And they've never caught it. It took 500 mallard ducks that decided to make our pens home. And they soon after, a couple of weeks after those mallard ducks started arriving, is when we started to see the symptoms of the avian flu. Now we know avian flu.
You mentioned a lot of things there. One thing that I'm sure is standing out to anybody who's followed Rebel News for a while is that they were tested with PCR tests. And you also talked about building up antibodies. I have an interview coming up with a scientist on this issue. Many know him. His name is Dr. Stephen Pellick with UBC, Doctor of Neurology and PhD Doctor of Medicine. Now, what I'm going to ask next is I just want to sort of further a couple of things. Number one, these birds are not being used for human consumption in any way, correct?
No, yeah, correct.
And you guys are pretty isolated where you are.
We're extremely isolated, and we're on a dead-end road.
Okay.
Yeah.
But wildlife can come in, as you've mentioned, and things like that. But the question is, if they have herd immunity, why do we have to kill them? Tell us a little bit, just so people can really appreciate what is being killed here if this happens, if the people don't come together and save these ostriches. What is some examples of what they were doing? I know there was a company that got very far with it and then it was bought out. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I mean, we could go back when this all started. So when during COVID, they started, they were doing some research online, and they found Dr. Tsukamoto from Kyoto, Japan. And after a while of reaching out to him and building a relationship with him, which that's very much based on a lot of trust, and they established a relationship, which took them into their passion for ostriches. So, Dr. Tsukamoto is known as Dr. Ostrich in Kyoto, and my mom and Dave and our families have been very much involved for over 35 years and love the ostriches very much. So there's a lot of compassion and passion out there. During COVID-19, they were really starting to look at, obviously, it was a scary pandemic, and antibodies. So Dr. Tsukamoto already had a lot of this work done, and he holds 26 plus worldwide patents. All those patents are based on the robust antibodies in an ostrich and their immunity. So when they were starting to dabble in antibodies and really start to look at them, they went and started working with immune biosolutions. And then that's where they had given them some of their egg yolk, and Frederick Leduc, who was CEO at that time, he did a bunch of tests on it. And their lab at that time, though, was funded by the chicken industry, so the chicken egg industry. So the antibodies of the chicken egg, and then selling those and testing those. Our test of the ostrich egg yolk came back way far superior than a chicken egg. And not too long after that, we had all the studies. We have all the studies. We have everything, all the data. We have all of that that has been given to us. But right after that is he got it slapped with an NDA, and Immune Biosolutions got bought out. So Biosolutions doesn't exist anymore. And so it was almost like a red flag, that because the antibodies of the ostrich egg are so much more robust than a chicken egg, that it was almost a competition, a little bit of a conflict of interest.
Wow.
But working with Dr. Tsukamoto now and just they created a company here in the last 3 years, and it's Struthio Bioscience. And that is with Dr. Tsukamoto in Japan, Dr. Stuart Greenberg in Boston, and then my mom, Karen Esperson, and her business partner, Dave Belinsky. That has been the whole sole outlook, focus of these ostriches here, is that they are in a joint antibody study between 3 countries. Now, those antibodies we've had tested, and we have amazing, healthy antibodies. And so it's, we have so much groundbreaking science that's not at the beginning stages.
Yeah.
It's developed and it's ready to use. Dr. Tsukamoto has offered that to the Canadian government. I think that's very alarming as well, that he's offered his stockpile of antibodies to the Canadian government and his vaccine for H5N1 avian flu, but there's no response. However, I just found out that like a week ago, there's been $590 million just allotted to Moderna for them to come up with a bird flu vaccination for humans. So roll up your sleeve and get ready for your next poke, because I guess it's going to be Moderna 1 in this, and they want basically to hush us up, because what would happen if people found out that our ostriches became resistant to their method of war? And what would happen if people knew that our ostriches were sick, we treated them, and they're better?
Yeah.
There were some that succumbed to their illness, of course. It was definitely a way stronger strain. Like, it was a harsher strain of avian flu, obviously, than from what we had in 2020. But now that they know what's going on, and they've built up their herd immunity. We're at 0 deaths, and everybody is looking fantastic out there.
Well, ding, 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 ding. Perhaps
Right?
you hit it all on the nail there when it comes to Moderna. My goodness. I will be following this closely. Most importantly, we are putting together a campaign to have people stand behind the efforts to save the ostriches as fast as possible. I know there's a petition out there. I know there's people coming out there to protest. It's all hands on deck. What message do you have for people about why this should matter to them?
Because if they are allowed to do this to our 400, 300-pound animals, you're next. This is the opening up Pandora's box, in my eyes, to the government. They thought we were isolated, but we were a high number of animals, large animals. So I think if they thought that quietly my mom and her business partner and that wouldn't be able to keep up with the animals or the emails, and the animal protocols, because those all had to get intense. And I don't think that they thought that it would be this publicized. And so they thought that if they could get away with our 400 animals, that then it gave them an excuse for the dairy cows and for the cat, you're the beef. And if we allow them to do this when we have science sitting here and we have the ability to help mitigate the migratory risk of the avian flu, and we have the ability to help stabilize the avian flu worldwide, and if we can't stop that here with our 400, there is no saving anybody else's farms. So we need to stand together as farmers, as mothers, as fathers, as just humans, and we need to protect what we have left for our children, and that's our rights to have animals and our land, and raise them how we want, and have a say in how we treat them, and protect them. We have an oath. When you have animals, you have an oath to your animal. That's to treat them, to love them, to protect them, and not to cause any pain and suffering and undue harm.
If an anonymous call can lead to 400 healthy 300-pound ostriches running around at 60 miles per hour to be wiped out, even though they bring so much to the table for humanity, who's to say the cows and pigs and any other animal isn't next? Go to savetheostriches.com to take action.